Today, I want to talk from the topic, do love. And I'll be using as a text Luke, the 7th chapter, verses 27 through 31, where it says, "But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. And if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you." Back in the mid-'80s, I was working at AT&T as a mechanical designer, and I had to go to Austin on a business trip. A few other people from my department also attended the conference. And one evening, after all the sessions were over, a group of 5 or 6 of us decided to go out for cocktails. And as it often happens, I was the only person of color in the group. We decided on going to the Cheers bar. It may have been called the Bull and Finch at that time, but we decided to go there since that show was popular at that time. So we got to the place and we had to go up some stairs, and a few of my coworkers went in the bar just fine ahead of me. But when I got to the door, suddenly they needed to see ID. They hadn't asked for that before I got there, but they wanted to see ID. And I pulled out my license, but they said I needed 2 IDs. So I showed them my work ID. And then they asked if I had anything else. And at that point, I said, yes, I have other forms of ID, but I'm Black on all of them. And I turned around and I left. But to my surprise, there was a commotion behind me. And one of my coworkers, I believe his name was Charlie, was at the door using words that I will not repeat here. And then he turned and he left with me. At that point, Charlie and I were not friends. He was just the guy I called when the system went down. That night, I ended up trying to calm him down as we looked for another place to go for our cocktail. And when he calmed down enough, he told me he had dated a Black woman in the past, and they had run into similar situations. Here I was, me with this tall, red-headed white man who had stood up for me when everybody else in our group went into the Cheers bar only thinking of themselves. I had sized up Charlie as just another white guy who was probably prejudiced. And here he was, doing the right thing, standing up for someone over a racial wrong. He lived into the text that we have for today. Do to others as you would have them do to you. This is a much needed message for us today. We live in a very divided country. If we didn't know it, we found out when we considered the fact that it's good that Biden got over 78 million people voting for him, but there were also 72 million who voted for Trump. We're very much politically divided. Look at the news today and see the clashes from the opposing sides in Washington yesterday. Democrats see the Republicans as selfish. Republicans view Democrats as unpatriotic. We end up seeing the extreme of both perspectives, especially when we see the many people who bring military-grade weapons to rallies and protests. I'm not sure what to do for the people at the extremes, besides pray for them and stay away from them. But there are still millions of people in the middle that we can still connect with across the lines of differing opinions. We work together, we go to school together, we go to the same grocery stores. We need to coexist or we will destroy each other and we will obliterate our democracy. I was reading in Time magazine that one of the benefits of the last 4 years is that it removed a bandage that hid the country's deep wound of racism. So now we can talk about it and hopefully actually do something about it. But our leadership needs to remember that short phrase, do to others as you would have them do to you. Everyone is worthy of respect, justice, and equality. So let's take a closer look at that very familiar, simple verse. The text for today comes out of the gospel as recorded by Luke. There's no definitive understanding of who the author's true identity is, however, but it's believed to be the same author who wrote the book of Acts. The author gives a detailed account of Jesus' life in Luke and tells about the beginning of the church in Acts. It's thought that the author is the same Luke that others wrote about in the 2nd century. That Luke was a physician, which may be why the Gospel of Luke is more descriptive when it comes to illness, afflictions, and healings. The author was very adept in the Greek language, and he had a strong understanding of the Old Testament. And he was also very familiar with Jewish practices and institutions, although he was a Gentile. You know, the Gospels were all written from their individual perspectives and for their particular purposes. For Mark, the focus was following Jesus meant taking up your cross and following him. For Matthew, it was Jesus fulfills scripture and establishes his authority. But for Luke, the focus was on Jesus as a compassionate person and a friend to outcasts. That perspective is true for the text that we have for today. The text is found in the section of Luke referred to as the Sermon on the Plain, which is very much like Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, which is actually not a one-time event, but a compilation of the teachings of Jesus. I like to refer to it as Jesus's greatest hits. I think it's interesting that the section starts with Jesus saying, "But I say to you that listen." I think he was well versed in the art of communication, and he understood the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is the process, function, or power of perceiving sound. It's the special sense by which noises and tones are received as stimuli. But listening, on the other hand, it means to hear something with thoughtful attention, to give it some consideration. What Jesus wanted to share was so important that he needed to make sure the crowd could get it. They had to listen. These days, with so much going on with our TV or our cell phones and so much internal and external noise, it's harder to really be heard. Perhaps we should follow Jesus's lead and make sure people are listening when we have something important to say. Laurie Buchanan said, "When we listen, we hear someone into existence." What Jesus was about to say sounds a little crazy if you're not really listening. He said, "Love your enemies and do good to those who hate you." Did I hear that right? Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. That's not how society worked then, and it's not how society works now. We don't love people who make us angry or hurt us in some way. If anything, we want them to suffer. We want karma to deal harshly with them. We want to forget about them and stay away from them, but that's not what Jesus meant. Love in this passage is less a noun, a characteristic, an emotional state, than it is an action. While it may be impossible to feel love for our enemies, it's not impossible to act in certain ways, even for those whom experience has shown to be the most entrenched of opponents. Jesus clarifies love as do good, bless, and pray. The following verses were examples from Jesus on how people can put love into action even when they're not feeling love. In this case, love is an action word. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. And if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, Do not ask for them again. Now, I think I can get with all of that except for the offering of the other cheek. I don't know about that one. I'd really have to pray hard on that one. Although I could always take a legal recourse. I don't know. Most of the things on this list are very difficult because no one should be subjected to abuse by anybody. Not verbal, not physical, not psychological, not from a loved one or from anybody else. The best thing to do in those situations is to keep yourself safe, even if it means you need to get away, leave the situation. Jesus did not condone the bad behavior of others, but he was trying to express what it should look like to be a member of the realm of God, the realm of love. He was trying to express that we do not draw our behavior from those who victimize us. These teachings assume that the readers or the listeners are victims. But Jesus offered no instruction for those who would strike, steal, hate, curse, and abuse others, because that's not the behavior of the realm of God. But to those who are vulnerable and likely recipients of the world's abuse, Jesus gave teachings on how not to be a victim. He said, take charge of your life and the situation by taking the initiative in loving, caring, and giving. I read in one of the commentaries the following passage. Followers of Jesus may be victims, but they are not to see themselves as such. They are not to have victim mentality, being shaped and determined by the hostilities unleashed on them, but rather to take the initiative, responding not in kind or simply playing dead, whining, or excusing themselves as victims. This initiative means acting not according to the principles of their oppressor, but according to God's principles of love, forgiveness, and generosity. This is not a covert strategy for a soft kill, but a living out of the life one learns in God, who is kind even to the ungrateful and the wicked. The way we deal with people that we perceive to be our enemy should consistently be to do the most loving thing. I remember Michelle Obama when she said, when they go low, we go high. In the text, Jesus summed up how to live a love-based life in some simple words that are known by people around the world. We refer to it as the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule was not unique to Jesus. It was a general principle that was probably very familiar to Luke's audience. It helped explain how to go about the difficult task of loving one's enemy. The Golden Rule, as we call it, is also found in Homer, in Seneca, in Tobit, and elsewhere. The Golden Rule could be the golden thread that would make our communities and our world a better place if we just listen to it and live by it. Many faiths have a form of the same words. In Christianity, we say, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. In Buddhism, it says, do not offend others as you would not want to be offended. In Islam, it says, none of you are true believers until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Judaism says, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah, and the rest of it is commentary. Confucianism says, do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. Sikhism says it a little differently. It says, I am a stranger to no one, and no one is a stranger to me. Indeed, I am a friend to all. Taoism says, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. You know, the golden rule could be the golden thread that would make our communities and our whole world a better place if we listen to it and live by it. I'm glad to revisit that golden rule. It's so simple and so profound. We are the ones with the power to initiate love. We can take charge no matter what others are doing. We can do unto others like sharing words of peace, love, and hope. We can do unto others by providing food for those who are hungry. We can do unto others by voting in a way that's most just. We can do unto others by just listening. Rumi says, listen with ears of tolerance. And we can do unto others by standing for them and with them when rights have been withheld or violated, like Charlie stood for me at that Cheers bar. As hard as it sounds, we really can love our enemies. We don't have to feel love. We just have to do the loving thing.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week at 10 a.m. Eastern Time via Zoom. Send me an email to drkathy100 at gmail.com. That's DRKATHI 100 at gmail.com. And I'll send you the information so you can join by Zoom. Well, have a great week.